Welcome to our program Consciousness in Evolution. My name is Ana Yogan. I am here representing Reaprendência International, a conscientiocentric institution dedicated to re-education and personal development. You can find our page Reaprendência International at YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Today we'll talk about scientific approach to consciential phenomena, which includes out-of-body experiences, telepathy, precognitions, and other mind-bending phenomena. Professor Paludetto will give us an in-depth exploration of consciential phenomena and their scientific underpinnings. He will present how modern science explores the paranormal through rigorous research, data collection, and experimental methodologies. We will also delve into how academic scientific methods and conscientiology can interact with each other, offering unique insights into consciousness research and personal development. Let's learn about research techniques and understand how the combination of scientific rigor with a consciential approach can amplify our comprehension of consciousness phenomena. Welcome our guest, Professor Leonardo Paludetto. He is a psychologist with a master's degree in social psychology and PhD candidate in transpersonal and integrative psychology. He is a volunteer of Conscientiology since 1994, a professor and researcher since 1997. Currently, he is conducting experimental research at Ectolab, the laboratory in Foz do Iguaçu, Paraná, Brazil. Here, Professor Leonardo, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me today. This theme is very important for me. I'm dedicating my time now to these approaches and the relationship with conscientiology. So I'm gonna present you some ideas, and after we can debate, or anytime you can ask me questions. I'm open to question during all the presentation, but I will try to have some moments at the end for only to those questions that you may have. So the first idea that I want to share with you here is that I'm very influenced by the activity that I'm conducting now. And just to give you a brief idea that what influences me in this presentation, it relates to this image here. This is one of the self-research that I conducted with me. And then after some months preparing and writing my project, so we have now the methodology to also apply this same experiment to other people in our lab here in Foz do Iguaçu. So we are inside Ectolab, an institution that dedicates to ectoplasma and also laboratorial research. And we are running there 35 experiments. So this is just a brief idea that what is the main influence in my thoughts now. I will come back to this idea, to this image, and then at the end I will explain you what is our research here, what we are doing inside this laboratory, and then we can discuss and see if we can explain more about these experiments that we are running here. First of all, I have to start with the idea that I'm trying to connect scientific approaches and conscientiology. They are already connected, but sometimes I think some people think that they are not so easy to dialogue among all those concepts. And I think that we can bridge some kind of relationship of these principles that we have in conscientiology and the theories and hypotheses that we can find in the literature, in the scientific literature. When I say scientific literature, I'm referring to academic scientific literature, and it's not opposed to conscientiology. Conscientiology is also a science, it's a new proposal of science, and then we follow all the pathway, the most reliable principles in science. But we are studying some different issues here. And then one of the main phenomena that we study here is the possibility to manifest the consciousness outside of the physical body. So, for example, what some people say astral projection, and we call the consciousness projection. So we have another body, we have another vehicle to manifest ourselves. So that's why we have this holosomatic principle inside our studies here. Also, we have not only the physical body, we have our bioenergy. So another principle is to study bioenergetics, for example, chakras and other manifestation of energy, biofield, for example. So as a result of this, we study multidimensionality. So it's not only the physical dimension, and we have also the idea that consciousness is not only restricted to this brain, to this body. We have the chance to remember and the chance to come back here in future lives, remember past lives and future lives. There's a branch of the science, the academic science, that is studying this theme as well. We consider here cosmoethics. So it's an ethic broader and more universalistic than the common and only intraphysical ethic. As a result of this, we like very much to be universalists. So the universalism without distinction of any kind of consciousness of this planet or outside this planet. So we think about, we have to be open to the universe. And we are in Conscientiology mainly investigating all those themes through the self-experimentation. So this is the main method here in Conscientiology. And I am now complementing this method with laboratorial research. That's why I showed you the first picture here, and then we will come back and explain what we're doing here. As a result of experimentation, we have to follow Valdo Vieira's principle of disbelief. He used it to say for us every time, don't believe in anything, not even, in this case, not even what you see or hear during this presentation. Experiment, have your own experiences. As a result of this, in Conscientiology, we have many people that are very practical, and then we are studying our experiments, personal experiments. So the researcher is also the participant of the research. And then we are trying to practice self-research. And so this is very good for us because we have the practical method, and then we are now trying to expand and also have the laboratorial method available for some of those phenomena that we are studying here. So my main point here is, what kind of dialogue can we establish with academic science and the scientific literature, the international scientific literature? So those themes that we study here many times are called psychic, paranormal, transpersonal, extraordinary phenomena, anomalous phenomena, or noetic. Noetic is a Greek word that means the extraordinary, those phenomena that are not usual in our daily life. So how to connect that? I will try to present you some ideas that I think are very useful for us to dialogue. When I say dialogue, I'm not saying that we have to explain for the scientific literature we only explain. We have also to learn from all this literature. It's very important, it's very rich literature. But also, we have the expectation to collaborate and show some new ideas. So this is, I think, two ways of this dialogue. And then we are trying to establish a bridge and then dialogue with some researchers and also some people that are studying this in practical terms. In my case, I am a PhD candidate, so I'm doing exactly now, this week's here in Brazil, I'm running these laboratory experiments with some objective measures of the vibrational state. That is a practical tool that we have in Conscientiology, and then I will come back to this later. Why to have this dialogue? Because, for example, for us, it's easy to say that for us, it's very interesting when we understand what science is doing and what science is unveiling about what is happening with conscientiology and consciential phenomena and awareness and psychology, all of these, and health issues. All of this is very important for us because we are trying to understand what is consciousness. What is the consciousness manifestation? So when we see some studies that are investigating what is happening during consciential phenomena, it's very useful for us because this can show us how the process of the phenomena is happening. In this case, is a study I will explain for you in detail in the next slides. Another contribution that we are very motivated to absorb here is to understand what not only the brain, but what other physiological reactions can we identify during consciential phenomena. And here I chose to show you the nervous system. This is a research that is conducted to show the precognition and nervous system. I'll also explain for you. And this, finally, those three themes that I will have examples on how to dialogue between conscientiology and those academic and laboratorial studies. What is happening during consciential projection? Is it possible to, for example, to detect that somebody have had the out-of-body experiences? So, and how to do that? And is there like an intensity? Some of these manifestations is more intense than others. So this is another theme that I will go more in deeply in the next slides. Just to start these examples of scientific knowledge, I have to show to you that sometimes people say, okay, those phenomena are very superficially understood in science. They don't have strong evidences. So I have to start with this article here in which he summarizes recent theories and many other studies that he found in the literature. And one important conclusion is that the evidence for psi is comparable to that for established phenomena in psychology and other disciplines. So he is showing here with statistical measurements that we have, for example, some psi protocols that are not only comparable, but much larger than those of the clinically recommended uses of aspirin or propranolol to prevent heart conditions. So we are using aspirin, we are using all those medicines, and sometimes we don't know that they have less evidence in terms of statistical terms than this parapsychological phenomena. So this is an evidence-based approach. Those studies that people are doing in the laboratory to study parapsychological phenomena, they are reliable. They are very strict to the best methods that we have in laboratorial research. And we have many of the statistical significance for us to consider this evidence-based. So I will start to to show you some of those studies, I think is very useful for us to understand consciousness manifestation and establish relationships with conscientiology. So my next slide here is about the brain and consciential phenomena, and I will explain here that previous slide that I only showed you the picture of an activity in the brain. So in this study here, it's a laboratorial study. The researchers invited 6 mediums. So those mediums were, they say that they were able to have this kind of connection with the extraphysical information. And then they proposed to the participant to receive the name of a deceived person. And then the researchers asked 25 questions for them. After each question, the participant was asked to silently perceive information relevant to the question for 20 seconds and then respond verbally. So from the 6 mediums, 3 scored significantly above chance. So this is very meaningful statistic for us. So 3 of 6, it's very meaningful for us. Also, one of the participants showed a significant activity in frontal theta. This is the name of a brainwave. And then this brainwave was diminished in a specific area of the brain that I will show in the next slide. So this is important because if this participant is having this kind of brain behavior, brainwave pattern, we can understand what is happening inside the brain when people are having this kind of connection with this information from not from the material world, but from a person that is deceived, for example. Also, they suggest here that the impression of communicating with the deceived may be a distinct state from ordinary thinking or imagination. So they could identify here, for example, in this circle at the left of this slide here, you can see that there's a representation for low performance, and the circle at the right, that is the representation of the brain activity, is showing the high performance results here. So we can see that for the mediums in this study, when they performed right answers, their brain were behaving in the way of the high performance brain activity. That means they showed a frontal midline theta waves decreased. So this region here was with less activity when the medium have the right answer. So the researchers considered this finding a very robust finding, and they made some kind of hypothesis, because what is this? What's the meaning of this frontal region present less activity? So this region is connected to executive functions. When we use this area of our brain, we are using our abilities to decision-making and short-term memory, for example. If the medium is using less those abilities, those skills, so they can have a better performance, they can present right answers for the experimenters. So we can think about that in terms of our phenomena that we study in Conscientiology. For example, we are not so used with mediumship. We prefer to have this more animistic, more active perception. So one type of perception that we train here is clairvoyance. So we are trying to perceive from this chakra what is the energy or the field of energy. If we can map this brain activity in the same way that those researchers mapped here in this kind of phenomena that is the mediumship, we could learn how to improve in the future our skills of clairvoyance or many other types of phenomena. I think this kind of activity that this medium showed here in the right answers, maybe I think it's very, very likely that when we are practicing clairvoyance, we should have also decreased decision making and short-term memory, because we are not creating contents from our memory or deciding from our brain. We are diminishing these skills, and we will be more open to the energetic, multidimensional reality. So that's a kind of very useful study for us. We could train, for example, people to how to decrease these executive functions. And also we could use neurofeedback, because when you have the neural map of what is happening inside the brain, you can train people to perceive when they can decrease what they did when they decreased that kind of brainwave, and then they can repeat that same exercise in the future, learning on how to diminish those kind of activity. And then this is very useful for us, for example, for training purposes here, for developing skills, for adjusting, calibrating, for example, what we are perceiving and we are practicing our phenomena here. Another conclusion of them, they asked for those mediums to not only to practice the mediumship, but also to practice other activities. For example, they asked for the mediums to think about a living person, listen while the experimenter describes another person, think about an imagined person, or maybe try to interact only mentally with a deceased person. All of these four types of mental states were different from the mediumship. This is a very important evidence, because we have, with this, we have the pattern. It's kind of a brain wave pattern that show that mediumship is a different state from the other regular activities that we can have only with our brain in this intraphysical activity that we are using to have. So this is another conclusion of this study, and this is very important to characterize, to differentiate that we have some kind of special signature of brain activity for mediumship. Also, again, I have to say, this is for mediumship. We can, for example, replicate this with many other types of phenomena here. This is a very important study for me, because this is very, they use a very rigorous methodology, and then this is an example on how to replicate this with other phenomena. Also, what is happening in the brain? To answer this question, I brought to you a second study. In this study here, it was telepathic activity, and they invited two participants for this study. One of the participants is a very well-reputed, very acknowledged person in India that receives telepathic messages with a very good reliability. So this person in this study was able to receive what the experimenter was thinking in another place, in a distant place from this participant. So he draw the image that the experimenter was thinking, and it was very accurate. So they try to understand what is happening inside the brain of this person when he is receiving this telepathy. And they used the MRI to investigate the brain. And this is a very precise investigation with MRI, magnetic resonance imaging. And they connected the idea of this research, the current findings of the research, of what Iguaçu, that is a very special person who have had many remote viewing, and Iguaçu was showing that he had a slow wave activity in the occipital lobes, mainly in the right hemisphere. And also they connected in a historical study that they conducted with Mr. Sean Haribans. And he was also a very experienced person who had these kind of flashes of images. And also the right hemisphere was playing an important role in this kind of perception. Together, those studies may suggest that we have a relationship with the right cerebral hemisphere and the activity of power perceptions. And then also they connected to a very important region in the brain, that is the hippocampal region. The hippocampal region, the right posterior cortical hippocampal region, was playing a very important role in this case of this person receiving the telepathy. So the conclusion of them is probably the right hemisphere plays a more important role in this kind of phenomena than the left hemisphere. And also the hippocampal, the right portion of the hippocampal is more related to paranormal phenomena. So what is this hippocampal activity? Hippocampal is related to activities of empathy. So when we have skills of empathy, we are activating the hippocampus. And then if we are trying to perceive, for example, a telepathic message, we have to have these empathic skills present in our brain manifestation. So conclusion and application for these, for example, in our themes here. When you have to have a perception from other person, maybe a telepathic reception of contents, or maybe you even, I think, even if you have the clairvoyance with another person, and we have courses here in Foz do Iguaçu, Brazil, that people train this, the complementarium. This is the name of the laboratory there in which we offer those courses, those activities. And then people try to visualize not only the physical expression, but also the energetic expression of the person. And then if this kind of conclusion here is validated for our phenomena, we should have a better training in empathy to have a better para perception, psychic perception. But we have to say that to train empathy is not only to think about other person. My master course was in social psychology, and then we study a lot of contents there that is related to how to understand better the other person. This is not so simple that then people use and think. I have not only to think about the other, I have to have a state that I am connected to the other. And the state to connect to the other, it relates to my openness. I have to be open. If I have some kind of repression, for example, if I want to block my thoughts, I will have also difficulties to connect to other people. Some people will not perceive what we are trying to manifest. So to train empathy is a more broad issue. So if we want to have better power perception, we have to train our skills of empathy.
Very, very nice. I am amazed here watching you talk, because we start studying Conscientiology, and mainly we are learning about self-research. And the part of science that is required in the scientific process, which are the replicability of the phenomena, was always a very, very challenging part, because whatever you experienced, it's okay. You can comprobate because you experienced. But when we talk about replicating the experience, that is a really more complex thing. And this last concept that you brought about empathy, I I believe it makes all sense, because whenever we start to develop interrelations and to try to assist not only ourselves but others, this is a capacity that we just develop if we have a genuine concern for the other person. And it's not something simple that you can just train, or an AI could make that. And nowadays everything is artificial intelligence, and it's not. It's something that really depends on your inner feelings. So amazing. I am really amazed to see your research. I can't wait to see how it's going to be ending.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for the contribution. I think the empathy is a very important topic for us, and we could have an entire life to discuss empathy. I think it's very useful for us, not only for conscientiology in terms of phenomena, but in terms of conscientiological behavior and relationship with other people here, because we live in a community, so it's very important for us also. Well, not only inside the brain is interesting for us, but also the activity of the sympathetic nervous system may explain us some of the relationships with consciential phenomena. So I brought to you here a study, and this study is very important for the statistics of this kind of phenomena, because the rating conducted with thousands of trials, and then we have so we have here 3,709 trials to consider in this study. So this is a study of precognition, so the ability to have the information of the future before the future happens. So in this case, he studied the electrodermal activity. The electrodermal activity is directly connected to the sympathetic nervous system, because when we are more excited, more anxious, more concerned, we are thinking more. When we are in this kind of state, we have the sympathetic activity increased in our body. When we are more relaxed, we have the other autonomous part of this system more active, that is the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic and the parasympathetic play a very important role in our emotions, for example, in our expressions, in our feelings. In this case, he measured the sweat in the fingers of the participants, and it's kind of very difficult to perceive when we have small and very tiny variations of our sweat, but this kind of equipment here is able to detect. So those activities, those trials that he performed, in general, presented that presentiment predicts a positive correlation between pre-stimulus EDA activity, which is the sweat of the fingers, and independently assessed emotional ratings of the photo targets. So I will show you a chart in the next slide that will become more clear for you here in this idea, but the activity previously to the image was increased when we had a stimulus with more emotion. And this correlation is very important statistically. The P is very meaningful for us, in this case, 0.008. What I'm trying to say when I'm explaining you about the phenomena is that if you look at this graph here, you see that at the 0 second here is the moment that the experimenter presented some kind of image, of a picture. Those pictures were very emotional is one category, and the other type of pictures was calm images. So you can see that the calm images, after the number 0 in seconds here, people use it to have a slightly more activity of the sympathetic nervous system. It's not much. It's very, very small reaction that we have here in this chart. And the other person in black here in this chart, we can see that after 2 or 3 seconds, those participants have had a much greater reaction, emotional reaction to those emotional pictures. So you can see after the 0 is very coherent, because when they saw a very emotional picture, they have had this kind of emotional state more intense than the calmer pictures. But the most important thing for this study in precognition is what happened before the 0 moment here. And you can see in this horizontal line, -1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 seconds. And then you can see that mainly after the -4 seconds, the black line was more active, it was in a greater value than the white dots here that we have. And then we have 3,900 trials. And this is very meaningful for us. In those thousands of trials, this pattern repeated. And then what does that mean for us? This means that before knowing the picture, people was more emotional active. When in the future, that they didn't know what was going to happen in the future, they presented the emotional picture. So before knowing, before seeing the very emotional picture, people was more emotional than before having those calm pictures. So this is a precognition. This is not awareness. This is the spontaneous manifestation of our sympathetic nervous system. The nervous system is more active before the presentation of more emotional images. So how can we explain that just with materialistic terms? It's very difficult for us to explain. So Dean Radin replicated this study many times, and the result is the same. The electrodermal activity is more intense before. So we have like our autonomous nervous system is playing a role in our prediction, in our precognition, but many times we don't realize that. So this is another application for conscientiology. And if we could have like a laboratory that people could see this and see when they have this sensation that I was experiencing more arousal before, maybe this is a very important signal for what's going to happen in the future. So this is very interesting because it's a physiological, and it do not depends on their awareness. It's automatic, and people many times don't figure out what is happening. Another study here, this is a bit different than the previous one, because this is for the guesses. So people here have had 4 types of cards, for example, and they guessed which one of these 4 cards they are going to present me after in the 10 seconds ahead of my guess. So they guessed what kind of card they were going to see in the future. When they guessed correctly, you can see in the first chart in the left side of this slide, it's identified with the letter A. The future is more dark than the future correct is darker than the future incorrect. Future incorrect is more in the 0 line here. And when people guessed the correct answer, their nervous system was less active here until the second 4, And then when they presented the card in the moment zero, those persons have had a more intense activity of the nervous system because they became happy. Oh, okay, I guessed rightly this answer. So here in this first chart here, we can see that people have a negative correlation. They have had less arousal in those moments that they presented the right guess than the incorrect guess. In this first chart, we have had the participants was women that participate here. And in the chart below this one, it was a male sample size, male participants here. Male participants have had a positive relationship, so they were more excited before knowing that the correct answer of their guesses was going to happen. So if I guess correctly, I didn't know that I was guessing correctly, I will be more excited, physiologically excited, than in the other times that I was guessing incorrectly. So this is a very meaningful idea for us as well. Not only before seeing pictures, but also when we guess something and we feel this kind of sympathetic arousal, we can be correct. Or maybe in the women sample here, they were feeling less arousal. So in this sample, in this research here, the female sample was negative correlated and the male sample was positive correlated. So this is for us also important because maybe this is playing a role in our lives and we are not figuring out what is influencing us in our decision-making process. And also when we try to access more information from extra-physical dimensions, maybe we have to pay more attention to these tiny sensations and to this emotional or the activity of our physiology, because these may show us some important information in the future. So this is two experiments of precognition, and the final theme that I'm presenting for you here is the extraphysical consciousness and objective measures. So how could we measure objectively the manifestation of consciousness? And this is the last study that I'm going to explain to you. And in this study, they used it's a very sensitive, highly sensitive, low light camera. So this camera is able to detect the low light that we have, and then they isolated a place. It's a very dark and isolated chamber, and they put this camera over the roof with the sensor from inside this chamber, and nobody could enter this chamber. This chamber was locked. So this is very unusual and very curious things, because the participants of this study were two purported spirits. So we are very used to invite people to participate in our studies. And in this case, they asked for the mediums to dialogue with two of the spirits, at least they call spirits here, it's extraphysical consciousness, to come back in some moment in during the morning, because the lab would be empty. Nobody was there at that time. And then they asked to this extraphysical consciousness go there and see what time the computer would randomly assign for them to enter inside the chamber. So none of the experiments knew what time the extraphysical consciousness would enter inside the chamber. It was a randomly assigned time for the consciousness to enter there with their psychosoma, with their energetic body. So they measured if that time asked by the computer, in that time, they trying to investigate, could we detect some kind of variations inside the chamber? In this case, the variation is the light, very low light variation inside the chamber. And then they compared some other moments that was the completely dark sensitivity of this camera with, coincidentally, the same time that Spirit 1 changed the darkness, and they could detect the presence of this Spirit 1 and Spirit 2. This is the second line is just the magnificent, more zoomed image of the lights. And you can see the Spirit 2 apparently have a more intense light than the Spirit 1. So we in Conscientiology are not so concerned about proof. And also in science, researchers are not so focused with this kind of proof. But this can be like a very important evidence of this kind of manifestation. If we have completely darkness, and then just at that time that computer asked for the consciousness to enter inside, we have this kind of light, it's an important evidence. So this is only one study. We have to replicate this study and then have more data. But I think this is useful because, for example, people are trying to have consciousness projection and manifest themselves inside many other places, environments. And then we could have this dark chamber, and then somebody could try to project and enter. It's not only for spirits here, like they are saying, or extraphysical consciousness, but also it can be for the psychosoma of somebody that is an intraphysical consciousness. So we could have this manifestation of our energy, our energetic body, the psychosoma inside the chamber, and see what is happening there. Did I go there or not? More than that, if this kind of sensor, if this kind of camera is able to detect the intensity of the light, we could have, we have like a psychosoma lighter than others. And what does that mean for us in terms of health, or in terms of balance, or in terms of intensity of energy? So this kind of detection could also be applied not only to detect only the presence of some kind of manifestation, but we could also use to detect some kind of variation in our body. Is there some place that is more like lighter than others? So all of these are ideas for the future. There's important theme here. Many times you're going to see those ideas, and then we are going to hear, the experimenter of, in this case, the University of Tucson, that is Gary Schwartz, they have his lab, and he have his ideas, and they are defining the methodology for these questions, those questions that he is eager to answer. We could, for example, adapt the methodological procedures to our type of questions. So some people will say, in Conscientiology, we're not interested about knowing if somebody enter or do not enter. But are you interested about calibrating your perception, testing your perception? You can, for example, perceive if there's a consciousness here, an extraphysical consciousness here or not. And then you can verify with an objective measurement if it was not likely. I'm not saying that it's for sure, but it's more likely to have this manifestation. And also the manifestation of our own energies. So I can see a lot of applications. I usually am thinking those days, and if we use science and all the powerful measurements of science to investigate in our way, we don't need to restrict our themes to the academic, for example, some people say to me, oh, the academic is very strict. Okay. And if we use this method for our purposes here. So this is one of my main motivation now. I see that we have to maintain the self-research alive and strong. And this is very important for us. But also we can add, it's a complement. It's not the main point, but it's a very important complement that we may have about these laboratorial studies. So I have already started to talk about implications and applications. I'm gonna just briefly explain to you some of the ideas because I have already explained you some of them. I was talking to the self-research. Okay, this is important. Valdo Vieira used it to say for us, we have to be very practical consciousness. We don't need to be a very theoretical or philosophical consciousness here in this dimension, in this life. This is a critical life for us. We can learn a lot. We can develop a lot. So self-research is really important for us. And this is the biggest theme. This is the most applied methodology that we have here. And this is our strong trait. I've talked to some of these researchers in the United States, and they keep saying for me, okay, you have a community of 600 people that moved to one city, that is Foz do Iguaçu, to study and to practice all of these phenomena and to improve the consciential manifestation. And I say, yes, we have there 600 or more. Some people say that we have already 800. And they became very impressed. And they say to me, okay, you could perform a lot of trials that we cannot perform here because we don't have sufficient participant for this type of experiment. So self-research is our main point because we have the practical experience of all of this phenomena. But I see that we are many times using other persons or historical case studies, theoretical research, surveys, and I think this is a lack in our type of studies here. I think the experimental and laboratorial research is very important for us because this can add an important layer, that is the layer to generalization. When we have broader samples, we can say, it's not my case, it's not my experience that I am trying to generalize for everybody, for 6 billion, 7 billion of people in this world. I don't know. Maybe it's only my experience, or maybe for the other people that have the same personality that I have. So I need to have more sample size. I need to replicate this. If this is not, to see if this is not just a coincidence, and if it's applicable for other person and replicating in laboratory, this can be also applied for other people as well. So I think this is a very important methodology for us nowadays, and we have a very good contribution in those themes in the future. I don't know if I have more time, but
you do. You still have time, and I think you touched a very important point, which is the possibility of a legacy. Because whenever you have the experience yourself, self-research is extremely important. But your words are going to be lost in the world. You might describe your experience in a book or something like that. But in terms of a body of knowledge, this body of knowledge is going to stay available for other people to take advantage of it only if we have this kind of documentation. If we can prove and, use the rigor of scientificity, and have this body of knowledge with proof of whatever we are doing. It doesn't matter, of course, if I am doing some kind of assistance process, the assistance is more important. But if I am able to demonstrate scientifically how that process works, this is going to stay forever. And other researchers are going to catch this point, and they are going to be able to expand this body of knowledge as well. So your role in terms of the progress of conscientiology as a science is very, very important. It's something essential that we are researchers, and we should be doing that kind of research to leave it to the world, so that other people can apply and develop as well.
Yeah, and I have the motivation to dialogue with this international community of scholars, researchers, specialists, practitioners, and let them know what we are doing here. And then, but with this, we have to use the same language. And scientific language is an international and a universalistic language. So if we have the measurements, the objective measurements, this is internationally understood. If I have my opinion, many times people will say, well, why are you thinking that your opinion is able to change my behavior? So I don't have more data to show people evidence. So I think this is very important. I may try to explain you briefly some of the ideas of this interconnection, if possible. Maybe we can extend a bit more, right, Anna? So let me show you some ideas here. I think that foundational approach is important for us because we cannot deal only with the conclusions here of many types of knowledge. We have to come back in this square, the green square here, or maybe come back to other square and see what they are doing, their practice and rituals that we can apply, and we can have this learning process. And I have one example for us here. John Kabat-Zinn, in '82, he published this article, and then he started to use meditation as a stress management practice, and he had very important, very good results there. He wrote here, all meditation practices using the SRNRP, this is his program, were thought independently of the religious and cultural beliefs associated with their communities and traditions of origin. So they are saying, we don't have to be Buddhist to meditate. We can use meditation to improve our relaxation, to improve our stress management without the need to be religiously connected to Buddhism. So with this kind of scientific, they used to call this the secular approach, we are practicing not only looking at the end, at the conclusions, but we are looking at the practices. If those people are practicing something that is useful, I can learn from that practice as well. I cannot use my preconception, my prejudgment, my prejudice to block and not going further to understand what these other line of thoughts are able to show me. In this book, the same author, John Kabat-Zinn, he again emphasized, it's not about adopting a particular belief system or ideology. It's more important to practice. It's more important to have the technique. So they delve deeper in the technique and not only the ritualistic and religious issues, and then they discovered that this is very useful, statistically useful to heal, to improve health of people. This is another example. Francisco Varela, he was one of the main neuroscientists of his age, and then he had the initiative to go there and talk to Dalai Lama. And from this point on, they have like a strong collaboration. And he was a scientist. He didn't quit his scientific models, but he was opened to understand and to hear from other practices what could be used in their laboratories. So he was very sympathetic to the idea that the first person experiences may play an important role. So Francisco Varela, he tried to not only investigate monks meditating, but he wrote this article here to say for the research community, we have to do research on our own manifestation. And he argued here that the circulation, the interaction between first person accounts, first person experiences, and external account of human experience would be the way to unveil what is really consciousness. The hard problem here, that means how to explain consciousness, briefly explaining to you. So they are proposing here how a method, and his method has to do with self-research together with external research and laboratorial research. This article was written to the research community. His idea was to try to convince those colleagues to have self-research as well. So self-research for us is important. I'm gonna cite here Gary Schwartz again. And in this book, he argued that we have a process of self-science. And then we have in this process what he's calling the type 1. Type 1 is when we have a careful observation of our lives, our personal lives. He classified as type 2 of research when scientists pre-test themselves before performing subsequent controlled research with participants, external participants. And the type 3 of the research here would be when we have a larger scale of systematic and intentionally designed research in the lab or experimental research. His idea is that we have to combine those 3 types. My personal life, I am making all the observations, annotating, and then I have the chance to test myself inside the laboratory, and then afterwards I will test this idea in a broader scale. So for us, it's very usual thing for our practice here, because, for example, we have this new book here that is Conscientiological Self-Experimentation. I think it's not available in English, but I hope soon it will be for you. But this is a very symbolic, it's a very important book for us here, because mainly in the chapter 7, I think he described a very good methodology to train our self-experimentation. We have other authors here that is self-scientificity. Adriana Kawachi, she has a lot of studies in this self-scientificity as well. And this article is part of, I think this article is very good for understanding this dialogue between very different paradigms. But also I would like to emphasize here, if you go there and type www.interparadigmas.org.br, you can find all of those articles. We have a journal here entirely dedicated to this dialogue between different paradigms. So there are people from outside Conscientiology that are writing in this periodic as well, and there are many types of articles on how to interact between different paradigms. So it's very useful too. To finish my presentation, I have my study, my example of this type 1, type 2, and type 3 study, that is with the vibrational state. For those that don't know what is vibrational state, is the movement of energies from head to toes and from toes to head many times, and then we have in some time we have this unblocked energy, and then we start to feel like the entire body is vibrating. It's a very peaceful, it's a very pleasure sensation that we experiment with the vibrational state. And with the vibrational state, many people relate a lot of benefits, a lot of effects. For example, some people feel good, some people improve their mood, some people maybe quit a headache. So there are a lot of things that happen because our idea is that when practicing vibrational state, we have this balanced energy in our system of energetic body. With this theme, I started to have my type 1 experimentation, and this was published in 2005. My type 2 experimentation of the vibrational state, I started to carefully observe myself during the vibrational state practice. And then this is just this chart here, just one example of all the ideas that came across in this study. This is the improvement of the frequency of practice of my vibrational state in all of those periods here, by the morning, afternoon, by the night. So this was improving, but not only this, the practice of the vibrational state, the intensively practice of vibrational state made me feel good at that moment, very good, very healthy. So this is part of this article here. This is type 1. I started with this kind of self-research. Afterwards, in my PhD, I practiced the type 2 study here because it's self-science, self-research. I put this cap in my head and I performed 15 trials with myself. And here I'm trying to understand everything that is happening in my brain, but sometimes I closed my eyes and I measured before, during, and after the practice of vibrational state. After practicing this for 15 trials, 15 times, I had some very interesting conclusions. But I didn't talk about this in a broader audience because I want to wait for the next step. Because if I start to say for people that my hypothesis, how I'm behaving, maybe I can influence other people in my study that is a laboratorial study. So this is type 2. When Gary Schwartz say, the experimenter first must study themselves, and then afterwards perform the trials in external participants. So what I did here is I wrote down the research project, and then I am now in the time that I'm collecting data, and this is type 3 study. The type 3 study, the same thing that I studied myself, we are trying to replicate and see what other people will have as brainwave pattern. We are measuring the EDE, the electrodermal activity. If you remember in previous slides, I explained that this electrodermal activity relates to the sympathetic nervous system activity. So we are measuring the sympathetic activity here in this experiment as well. And we are measuring heartbeat and breathing, the frequency and the pattern of breathing as well. So, and then we have also a random number generator that we are trying to understand if practicing vibrational state in comparison to meditation. We have two groups here, people that go there to meditate and people to go there in our lab to practice the vibrational state, and then we can compare. So we are trying to understand whether the random number generator will behave differently when people are practicing vibrational state or meditation. We also are investigating this phenomena of the electrodermal activity related to the reaction with images. It's almost the same images that study that I showed you that Dean Reagan conducted. And then we also have a final interview that we are trying to characterize the vibrational state with the use of a very good methodology. I'm very impressed with this methodology. And this part of the study is made in partnership, in collaboration with the University of Virginia. The researcher there, Marina, she is interviewing all of the participants of our studies with the microphenomenology method. And then we're going to have the the qualitative data as well. We have the quantitative data, objective measures, the numbers, the charts, the graph, and then also the self-reported case. And then we are using the microphenomenology to systematically describe the vibrational state. So with this image here, I finish my presentation. And I thank you, Reaprendencia. Thank you, Anna, for inviting me. And this is our email address if you want to share some ideas or ask us questions, or maybe send us ideas for future laboratorial studies that we can perform here.
Thank you, Professor Leonardo. It was great having you here. Like I said before, you are already invited to come back whenever you want. Thank you, everybody, for sharing with us this presentation. On March 16th, we are going to have Professor Amaury Pottieri. He's going to talk about self-non-conflictness. And I'd like to talk to you about some of our events. We have now happening in the US, Fundamentos da Conscienciologia. This course is a hybrid course, and it's going to be in Portuguese, taking place in Roswell, Georgia. We also are having now the new course, Essential Concepts of Conscientiology. This course is completely online. It's 16 lessons, and it's about to start on March 22nd. Okay, so you have the chance of learning more about this phenomena, learning more about conscientiology, and come and discuss with us all these contents that are really very interesting. I am really thrilled to see the results of Leonardo's research. And like I said, it's very important when we come from the authoritative knowledge and we are going to the scientific knowledge, where evidence is more important than other paradigms and other lines of knowledge. So congratulations on your research, and we are looking for more.
Okay, good. Thank you. Maybe in the future I can come back and present the results of this study.
Okay, you are already invited. Thank you so much. Happy evolutionary journey, everyone, and thanks for joining us today.